We begin by thanking the Talmud Torah sponsors of the month of Teves, Yoel and Sara Kelman, in honor of the birth of their daughter, Oriya Tahel, and hope that all couples praying for children will soon have their tefilos answered. Amen. We also thank Steve and Teri Czinn, who are the Talmud Torah sponsors for this month, in honor of their grandchildren, Adin, Tzvi, and Naftali, Moshe. We should have a lot of nachas from them. We should all see a tremendous amount of nachas from them. As well, a Daf Yomi sponsorship. Today's Daf is sponsored by Brian and Karen Gold. Refuah Shlema for Chana Baschaya Asna for the 8th day of Chanukah. Refuah Shlema. Okay, today's Daf is Daf Chaf Daled. We are going to pick up from Daf Chaf Gimel Amud Beis 23b. V'su Rebbe, right? 2, 4, 6, 8 lines up from the bottom. Is that where we left off yesterday? 8 lines up from the bottom? Okay, so I'm just going to give a very brief introduction. As we're going to go through the Gemara today. Again, it's going to be a fascinating daf full of beautiful stories about beautiful Yidden. This is one of those amudim when we have to realize that every single story that we have in Shas is here to teach us a lesson. They're not just stories. They're not just here because they're stories. They're always here to teach us a lesson. And sometimes the stories that we're going to read will leave us just wondering what in the world happened here. Why did it happen? Why did he do this? Or this perhaps flies in the face of everything that we understand to be important to us. So again, I'm going to do my best. I looked around at some of these stories to try to find a better shot. I'm going to try to present all the stories to you today with the best possible practical lessons from them to be able to help us learn from it. But again, if the story is in Shas, if the story is here, the story is important, the story has a lesson. And again, it's important for us to recognize that when we're talking about Amirayim that are here, and stories about different Amirayim that are in the Shas, in the Gemara, we have to recognize Amirayim are not people like us. Amirayim are tzaddikim. There are people who did not make the cut, and they were referred to in Shas as Ahu Gavra, that guy. Because not everybody deserves to have their name mentioned in Shas. And Amirayim who have their names mentioned in Shas, that means that their name is permanently stamped into Torah Sheba'al Peh. That means forever and ever and ever, their name and their story is going to be part of Torah Sheba'al Peh. It's going to be part of Shas forever and ever. And these are very special people. And sometimes if we can't really wrap our head around the story, so then perhaps we don't have proper pshat in the story. We don't properly understand the story. Nevertheless, the story is important, and the story has a lesson. And if we don't understand it, hopefully one day we will get to understanding the story. Okay, so if you remember from yesterday, we were going very quick. And we were discussing different stories. First, we began about the stories of Rav Huna and Rav Chisda, and we discussed how the difference between how they were mispalel. We talked about the strong people of Eretz Yisrael, like Rav Yonah and Avud Rav Mani, and we talked about the Hasidim of Bavel. And now we're going to say a couple more stories just about tzaddikim when it came to issues of rain or other issues. V'su Rabbi Mani Bray have a kometzari late to Bein Nesiyah. Bein Nesiyah were bothering Rabbi Mani. They were bothering him. Ishtatach al kiver dovua. He went to his father's kever and he was mispalel. Amar lei Abba hanu mitzarli. They're bothering me. Yom echad have a kachafi hasam. One day he came there. Inkut kara desus vayu ad de kabilu allowed limitzarli. The horses of these people got stuck. Their feet got stuck. They couldn't move until they were makabel upon themselves to stop bothering him. This is an interesting Gemara because it sounds like he was mispelled to his father, mispelled to his father after his father had already passed away. This is a big sugya when someone is mispelled at a caver. When someone goes to be mispelled at someone's grave, are you mispelled to the neshama of the person, or are you mispelled to the Rebbeinu Shalom in the name of the person? In other words, remember this person, remember this tzaddik, remember this Talmid Chacham. And he asks Kadosh Baruch Hu, just remember this person and in their schos help me. Here it seems clear that he's saying Abba Havim et Tzara Le. So this is one of the rayas that they bring to that way. Generally speaking, we do the second. We mispal to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the schos of the neshama. Okay, the Gemara goes further. The Surah Bimani have a shchiach kamed Rav Yitzchak Barli Elishav and Armalei Asiri Debechami Kamatzarali. The wealthy people of Debechami are bothering me. Amar Lianu. You know what? They're bothering you, let them become poor. The rich people, maybe they're getting a little bit lost in their wealth, let them become poor. And what happened? Immediately became poor. Omar, Kadach Guli. Now that they're so poor, they're schnorring money from me. Yesterday they were bothering me because they were so rich. Now they're so poor, and now they come schnorring. Every time I go to buy some food, they want me to buy something for them. So Omar, Li'asru. All right, to become wealthy. They became wealthy. So he went back and he complained again. And he said, Amar, loy mekabeli ali inchi besi. He went back and he complained and he said, as this is the way Rashi explains it, my wife is not very good looking. And he complained. He went to his Rav and said, my wife is not very good looking. So Amalei, he said to him, Mashma, what's her name? And he said, Chana. So what did he respond? Tis yafi Chana. Chana should be beautiful. And what happened? Vinis yafis. She became beautiful. Overnight, Shemash became beautiful. What happened the next day? Amalei ka megander alai. She's pestering me. She's driving me nuts. And now that she's so beautiful, she got a little bit lost in her beauty. Now she's driving me nuts. Every single day, she thinks so much of herself because she's so beautiful. Amalei hachi taksachan shakarisa. Let her go back to her more ugly state. Okay? And she went back. Now she went back to the way she looked originally. So what's the pshat in the story? We'll just say one more. Hanu trei tamidi dehevi kamed Rabbi Yitzchak Belishev. There are these two tamidim who came before Rabbi Yitzchak Belishev. In Amrulei, they said to me, "Boy mar rachmi alon denachgam tuva." In other words, we see all your tefilos are in a skavel. Can you please do us a favor and be mispal for us? We should be very smart. Amar lahu, he said to him, Imi haisa ushlachtia. I used to have that ability to be able to be mispal for people that they should be very smart, but I have gotten rid of that possibility. So there's a number of different understandings of what this means, that imi haisa ushlachtia, that he used to have it. Rashi seems to say, davar zeh haya biyadi. It's on the left side of the page here. Davar zeh haya biyadi. This used to be something which was in my hand. Shekol ma shani mevakesh hayu noistinli va'achshav ain't tefilos mikubelas al kach. Now it doesn't work. In other words, it used to be that I would be mispal, that people should be smart, and it would happen. They would become brilliant overnight. They become a genius. But it doesn't work anymore. There are others who will explain it differently, that it used to be that I thought that there was benefit to be mispal, that someone should be smart. And after doing it a number of times, I recognized that that's not an appropriate tefillah. It's definitely always good. It's good for someone to be smart. It's very helpful to be smart. But everyone has their koach that they were given. Everyone has their strength that they're given. It's not necessarily appropriate for a person to change the level of intelligence. I think it's very important to focus on all these stories, because we notice that in all the stories where all the tefilos were niskabel, eventually we ask to reverse them. And sometimes you have to be careful what we wish for, because sometimes we just think the easy way out of all of our problems is just simply being mispal that a massive miracle should happen and everything should change. Person has shalom bayis issues. If only his wife would be the absolutely most beautiful woman in the world, everything would be solved. And then it happens. He sees now he has himself another problem. He can't handle it. You have the same thing. A person is mispal that his enemies become poor. And you know what? That wasn't the answer. The tefillah is that his enemies should stop bothering him. That's the tefillah. Not that his enemies should become poor. They became poor, and then now he couldn't deal with them because they were so poor. They needed his help. All these tefillahs over here remind us that sometimes we get lost in what we really wish for, and you have to recognize that that's not necessarily the appropriate thing to wish for. That dramatic nisim should happen. And especially when it comes to chachma. People always think if I was just a little bit smarter, everything would be better. It would be easier to learn. I'd be much more successful at work. And then being smarter comes along with its own challenges. So everything is a challenge, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us our challenges, and it's not our job to try to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to create miracles that we should become different people. Rav Yossi bar Avin, Hevishchiach Kamei, Rabbi Yossi de Min Yukras. Rabbi Yossi bar Avin was a Talmud of Rabbi Yossi de Min Yukras. Shavke, he left his Rebbe. V'yasel l'kamed Rav Yashi. In other words, Rav Ashi. He left the yeshiva. He was learning in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yossi de Min Yukras, and he packed out. He went to learn somewhere else. Yom Echad, Shamei to Kagaris. He heard them learning. In Amar Shmuel, they said, Hashol dag menayam, someone who pulls a fish out of the water, b'Shabbos, on Shabbos, kivin shiyavish bo kasela, once the fish dries up in one area the size of a coin, chayiv. He's chayiv. What does that mean? Rashi means even though, Rashi says in the second line, even if the fish is still kind of jumping around afterwards, and while it's still jumping around, he throws it back into the water. Chayav mishum netilas neshama. He is chayav for taking the life of this fish. Shehi av malacha. It is an av malacha. It's under the category of shchita, of slaughtering an animal is also killing a fish. Now the Gemara is saying that if you take out the fish, Shmuel says, take out the fish, and a part of the fish dries up the size of a coin, at that point in time you could assume the fish is going to be dead, it's not going to survive, and therefore he's chayiv for killing the fish on Shabbos. Amar lei, so he said, V'leima mar ubein snapirov. So this is Rabbi Yossi bar Avin. He said, why don't we say that it has to be specifically that it's dried out between its fins? Amar lei, lo savar mar tahid Rabbi Yossi bar Avin amra. He responded to him, he said, you just pointed out that line, that has to be between its fins. Why didn't you quote the person who actually says it? The person who says this is Rabbi Yossi bar Avin. So he said, excuse me, I'm sorry. Amar lei ananihu. My name is Yossi bar Avin. In other words, Rashi points out that the Mishnah of us tells us that Shekala Omar Davar B'Shem Omro, if you say something in the name of the person who actually said it, in other words, don't take credit for things that other people said. Maybe Geula Olam. We learned this from Esther. You say something in the name of the person who actually said it, it brings redemption, it brings Geula to the world. So he was asking him, why indeed did you not say this over in the name of the one who actually said it? So he said, I did. It's actually me. My name is Yossi bar Avin. So he said to him, hold on a second. Amar lei, V'lav kamed of Yossi ben Yukras havishchiach. Weren't you a Talmud? Didn't you learn in the yeshiva of Yossi ben Yukras? So he said, havishchiach mar. Amar lei hein. Yes, it's true. I used to learn there, but I switched here. I came to learn in your base medrash. Amar lei my taima. My shavke. Sorry. Amar lei my taima shavke mar v'as lahachi. Why did you leave Rabbi Yossi ben Yukras and come learn over here? A person who does not have any mercy, any rachmanis on his own children, how is he going to have rachmanis on me? In other words, he said, I noticed that there was behaviors with Rabbi Yossi ben Yukras, with his children, which showed he did not have rachmanis. He did not have mercy on his own children. So as a Talmud, I could not learn in the yeshiva where the Rebbe has no rachmanis on his own children, because what would that mean for me? Would he have any rachmanis on me? So Gemara says, Bray, my havi. What was the story with his son? Yom Echad, one day, havi agri le agiri v'davu. Rabbi Yossi ben Yukras hired workers to work for him in the field. Nagalahu, he came late. Below icy le rifti, he did not bring them their lunch. It was commonplace that when you hired workers, it was your responsibility to feed them. You would bring them lunch. So he hired these workers. They're outside working very hard. And he came late. Yosef ben Yukras came late to bringing them lunch. But they were very hungry. Amrulay, they said to Amrulay Lebrei, they said to the son of Yosef ben Yukras, Kafinan, we're very hungry. And Haviyasvi Tuteteina, they were sitting under a fig tree. Amar Te'ena Hotzi Perasecha V'yochle Parle Apple. He said to the tree, not only to the tree, but he said to the actual figs, come out, send your fruit forward. It's like this, my father's workers will have what to eat. They were very hungry. And what happened? Hafiku va'achlu. Indeed, the tree listened and made the fruit get ripe, and they were able to eat. So again, it's important to pause here for a second and say, this doesn't happen to everybody. Not everybody has the ability to be able to just tell a tree, you know something, it's time to send the fruit out. So this is a tremendous testament to who we're talking about, the tzaddikim that we're talking about. They're able to just perform a miracle on the spot. Adahachi v'hachi. In the meantime, Asa Avua, father came. Amar lahu lo tenaktu b'dataychu devi naaga amitz dehai denaga amitzvah torachna v'arhashtu have hu disagai. He said to them, don't be upset at me that I came late. In other words, he acknowledged, I'm sorry that I came late to bringing you your lunch. But the problem was, I was in the middle of taking care of a mitzvah. What the mitzvah was, we don't know. But we can understand that perhaps it was obviously a very time-sensitive mitzvah, and he was not able to leave it to bring them lunch. And he felt very bad that he had come late with the lunch. So he said to his workers, please don't be upset at me that I came late with your lunch. I was not just, wasting my time. I was in the middle of doing something very important. Arule, they said to him, Rachmana lisbacha kihechi to asbach barach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should feed you the same way your children fed us. In other words, they said, don't worry about it. We got lunch because your son gave us something. Amar lahu mehecha. Where did you get food from? Where did you bring it from? So he said, Amru hachi vachi abimaisa. He told already the story exactly the way it happened, that they had instructed the tree to make the figs get ready, and afterwards they had what to eat. Amar lo, bini ata hitrachta es konecha lahotzi te'ena perasesh lo bezmana. You have bothered Kadosh Baruch Hu to make the fruits come out at the time that they're not ready. In other words, you performed a miracle for no good reason. Yesof shlo bezmano, Kadosh Baruch Hu should gather you not at your time. Ultimately, he cursed his son that he should die early. Brati, my he. What's the story with his daughter? So Havila Brati Balas Yofi. His daughter was very beautiful. Yom Echad, one day, Chazilahu Gavra Harikriya Bahutza. He was literally making a hole in the fence. It's like this, Vikachazila. He was peeking at her. In other words, this is a crime. I think there's a word for this in English. I don't remember what it is. But he was snooping in to take a look at this girl. Amarlo, he said to this guy, Maihai, what are you doing here? You're making a hole in my fence. So he said, Amarle, the guy admitted, Rebbe, if I'm not going to be zocha to marry your daughter, can't I at least get an opportunity just to look at her? So here, Amar La Biti, he said to his daughter, you're causing pain to the world. Shuvi la'afrech. Go back to the earth. Go back to the earth. In other words, he cursed her that she should die, and people ultimately will not stumble over you. And the Bach adds in two painful words, which are Bechein, Hava, and that's exactly what happened. These stories are tremendously difficult to understand. As a father here, what did his kids do wrong? Number one, what did his son was out there in the field. He notices people who are hungry, and he gives them something to eat. What's the terrible avera that they did? But even more disturbing, I think, is the second story. I'll tell you why. This story seems to put her at fault for something she did, for something absolutely out of her control. She's a beautiful woman, and what does he want from her? What does he want from her? Why did he curse her? It's a terrible premature death because she was beautiful. And I think also this also touches a very raw nerve, because I think one of the most destructive things that can be taught to a girl is that the reason why we have halachas of tznius is so like this, she should not cause men to stumble. I know that this is taught in many Beis Yaakovs around the country, that the reason why they have to dress like this and like that, and these rules and that rules, is because of Lifnei Iver. They have to make sure, because there's all these wild men out there, and therefore it's your job as a Beis Yaakov girl to make sure that you're going to protect the Yetzer Hara. That's not the reason why we have halachas tznius. Halachas tznius are relevant to everybody. It's relevant to men. It's relevant to women. Perhaps they manifest themselves differently, but ultimately the message of tznius is not that you are a stumbling block to the world. A person should never be taught that your existence is an avera. Your existence is a stumbling block for other people. And you should get dressed like this, and you should get dressed like that, because if you don't, you're going to be responsible for what some prosta guy out there does. That's not the way we should be teaching our daughters. And I think this story can mistakenly be translated as a source for such a mahalach, for such an approach to teaching tznius. So what's the pshat in the story? What is the pshat in the story? Number one, this is why Rabbi Yossi bar Avin left. The Gemara is telling us why he left. He left because he saw this. So perhaps the lesson of the Gemara, number one, is don't do this. Again, we're talking about Rabbi Yossi ben Yukras. He's this very special person. His children were able to perform nisim to change teva because of his chosim. He was a tzaddik. He was a very special person. He was really an overwhelmingly, he's out of our league. We don't have words to describe what these people are like. But the Gemara is telling us a story about something that he did wrong. So much so that his Talmidim felt like, I can't learn here anymore. I have to switch yeshivas because I noticed such behavior with my Rebbe, which makes me not be able to learn there anymore. So that's number one. Perhaps the lesson of the story is, this is a lesson in what you should not do. Number two, it's slightly mashma like this from the Maharsha. It sounds like this from the Maharsha a little bit, that perhaps she was not just beautiful, but she was dressing in a way intentionally very provocative, where she was seeking the attention of men. In other words, she caused herself to be somebody who men were pursuing. So that's a little bit of a different story. Again, whether the appropriate thing for someone to do when their daughter is seeking attention is to curse them that they should pass away, that's clearly not what a person should do. But again, to make a little bit more sense out of the story, perhaps she was intentionally dressing or making herself up in a very provocative way so that she should be attractive to other people, and that was something which he felt was way out of the league, especially talking about such a tzaddik and his daughter, someone who grew up in such a home. But again, like I said at the beginning of this year, these stories are not easy stories to understand, not necessarily easy for us to wrap our head around. We're talking about very special people. The stories are here in the Gemara for us to learn a lesson from it. If it's here, it's not just a Maisa, it's not story hour. It's here for a very important purpose, and therefore we have to understand them to the best of our ability and recognize that they're here for a lesson. Havile, we're going to continue. Havile hu chamra. He had, again, another story about Yossi ben Yukras. Havale hu chamra. He had this donkey Ketavi Agrila when he would rent it out. Kol Yoma, every single day. L'orta heavy mashti le igra agaba. The system was you'd rent this animal, this donkey, and you'd put the money on the back of this donkey and send it back home. Now, L'orta heavy mashti la igra agaba. They put the wages, the amount of money that they have to pay for it, on its back. The asla beimaro, come home. The itafula o batsrila lo asya. If there was not enough money, or if there was too much money, the donkey did not come home. In other words, the donkey was so sensitive to the weight of how much money was placed on its back that it would not leave unless it had the proper amount of money. And if it had too much, it would stay there until it took it off. If it had not enough, it wouldn't leave either. In other words, exact payment only, no change. And that's what happened. Perhaps this story is here just to tell us, even though we heard these two stories about these two stories which were cast in a negative light on Yossi ben Yukras, it's important to remember that even his donkey was so special that it wouldn't take extra money. The Gemara goes on to say, Yom Echad, one day, Inchi Zuga de Sandli Allah. while they were loading up the back of this donkey, they by mistake forgot a pair of sandals, a pair of shoes. Below Azla, it did not go ad deshaklanua mine until they took off those sandals because it weighed too much for Azla that it came. Guess this is another story about Yossi ben Yukras. Alazar ish birta kad havichazu legabe tzedakah havi tashu mine. Alazar ish birta was a person when the gabe tzedakah would seem they would hide from him. Why? To kolmai to havi gabe havi yavlahu. He just couldn't control himself. Whenever he saw the gabe tzedakah, he gave the gabe tzedakah all of his money. So the gabe tzedakah realized I can't go collecting by this guy anymore. I can't ask him for money because every time I ask him for money, he gives me all his money. So they would hide from him. One day, this person, Elazar Ish Birta, was going to buy things for his daughter's wedding, and Chazyu Gabe Tzedakah. He got a sighting of the Gabe Tzedakah and Tashamine. Sorry, that Chazyu Hu Gabe Tzedakah. The Gabe Tzedakah saw him. What did they do? They went into hiding. Azov Arat Basrayu. He ran after them. Amar lahu Ishbasichu b'may askisu. He made them swear, and exactly how this works to make someone else swear is not so clear. But he made them swear. What are you busy with? In other words, what are you raising money for now? Amrulay, they said to him, B'yasom v'yasoma, we are raising money for a yasom and a yasoma who are getting married. Amr lahen havoda, I take a shvua, an oath, shehain kodmin lebiti shakal kol dahava badei v'yavaluhu. He said, my daughter's getting married, it's true. And yes, I'm out there right now in the market buying things for her wedding. But a yasom and a yasoma who are getting married, an orphan, two orphans who are getting married, they are much more important than my own daughter. And therefore, he gave it to them. Pash lechad zuzah. He had one zuzah left. In other words, he went to the marketplace with one zuz. And the only thing he had left was one zuz. What did he do? Zavon lechiti ba'asik shadye ba'akalba. He bought a little bit of wheat. He came home and he threw it into the storage house. He put it into the garage. Now the Marsha does point out that why was this the right thing to do? He went to go buy things for his daughter. And how could he go ahead and spend all his money and not marry off his daughter? Maybe one's more important, one's less important. But if it's less important, it doesn't mean you don't do it. So he says, he goes back and forth, but ultimately he says it must be he had more money at home. So it's true, he gave all the money he had on him now, but he had all the money at home. The Gemara later on does prove that they were very poor, but it says even though they were very poor, they still had some money left at home. Okay, so now Asai Devisu, his wife came home, and Amra Labrate, she said to her daughter, "My Aisi Avuch, your father went out to go shopping today to buy things for the wedding. What did he bring home?" Amra Allah, she said to her, "Koma da Aisi b'kalba shadisi." I don't know what he brought home. Whatever he brought home, he threw it into the garage, put it into the storage. Asila miftach, when she went to open it, she went to open up the storage house. Chazas akalba to malichiti. It was filled from top to bottom with wheat. The kanafik pitzinora dedasha. It was passing through the threshold of the door. She couldn't even open the door well. Couldn't push the door open because it was so full of the wheat. Azla brate, the Beit Midrash, his daughter went running to the Beit Midrash. Amrale, she said to her father, come take a look what your beloved master has done for you. Again, I mentioned last week. What does the Rebbeinu Shalom refer to as when we talk about him? Ohavecha, the one who loves us. So she understood this. She was raised by parents who taught her that the 14th Ani Mammon is the Kadosh Baruch who loves you. So she went running to her father and she said, "Go look what Hashem who loves you so much has done." Amar Allah, ha'avoda, which is a lashon of shvua. Take a shvua, harehain hektish alecha ve'ein lecha behen elak echad ma'aniyei Yisrael. So here's where we see that they were poor, but he said we don't benefit from nisim, and this is something which we saw earlier in the Gemara. But Rashi says in the Rashi elak echad ma'aniyei Yisrael, he said mishum dema'isa nisimhu. This is a story of a nes, of a miracle. V'aser la'adam lehenos b'ma'isa nisim. It's prohibited for a person to be nena for ma'isa nisim. Now it doesn't really mean that it's aser, but As Rashi ends off, he said, we live in a world of Teva. Rebbeinu Shalom created a certain nature for how the world works, and if you want to manipulate it, so then ultimately it requires a tremendous amount of sechusim, takes away from our merits, from our abilities to be able to ultimately benefit from our merits, our zechusim in the olam ha'emes, and therefore he told her, don't benefit from those chitim because it's not going to be good for you. Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya, Gazar Tanisa. Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya, not Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya, he was Gazar Taanis because it was raining. Boy Rachmi v'lo asa mitra. He went to be mispalel, and what happened? Nothing. It didn't rain. Omar Kama Ika Mishmuel Haramasi li Yehuda ben Gamliel. Look how much of a difference there is between Shmuel, the lofty one, and Yehuda ben Gamliel. Oy lai ledar shekei nitka. Woe is to such a generation that got stuck with me. Oy lai lemi she'alsa biyam of kach. In other words, he was bemoaning the fact that he was the leader of his generation. He could not bring rain when he was mispalel. Chalash daite, and he started to feel very bad. And what happened? V'asi mitra, and it started to rain. So we see from this Gemara that sometimes it takes just a little bit of humility, and that humility helps the tefillah be niskabel. It's always kedai. It's always worth it to pay attention to these things, because again, most of us don't have the ability to just submit a prayer and get an immediate response. So we do have to follow the mahalach of these Gemaras over here. The Gemara says if a person will lower themselves, use a little bit of humility, and if you use humility and genuine humility, that helps our tefillos be niskabel. Debei Nesiya Gazar Tanisa, the Nasi, the leader of the generation, also Gazar Tanisa, he was Gozer, he decreed that there should be a fast day. V'lo Odinole l'Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. He forgot to tell Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. L'Tzafra, in the morning, Odinu, he let them know. Amarle Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish said to Rabbi Yochanan, Halalo kabilna ala miorta. We're not makabel taanis. We learned earlier you have to be makabel taanis. And Michta the day before. Amarle anan basrayu gararinon. You're right that we didn't do it, but since the Nasi was makabel taanis for us, so we ultimately follow their Kabbalah's Taanis from yesterday. Debei Nesiya Gazar Tanisa. Again, the Nasi, he instituted a fast because it was not raining. V'lo asa mitra, it didn't work. No rain was coming. Tana lahu Oshia Zeira, Dimin Chavraya. Oshia Zeira, the small Oshia from Chavre, he said, V'haya im me'ena ha'eda nasa l'shgaga. He quoted a pasuk that if from the eyes of the generation there was a mistake that happened. Mashal. And he went on to explain, what does this mean? Mashal lakala. This is a mashal lakala shehi beveis avia. She's still in her father's home. Kolzman she'ineo yafos ein kol gufa tzricha bedika. If a girl is beautiful in her eyes, she has beautiful eyes. Ein kol gufa tzricha bedika. Nothing else needs to be checked out. In other words, a person has beautiful eyes. The rest of their body is beautiful. Eineo trutos. If she does not have beautiful eyes, kol gufa tzricha bedika. Then you have to indeed check the rest of her body to make sure that she's beautiful. This is a whole discussion that came up with Leah. It says the Ve'eni Leah Rakos. So it's a discussion exactly what that means. The pashtus was she did not have nice eyes. There are those who say the other way around. But again, the bottom line here is that he was actually throwing out a line there, and he was saying, you know something? If there's a problem, and the reason why there's no rain, the reason is because the Einei Ha'eda, the Eda, which is the leaders of the generation. If they're not beautiful, then what has to happen is every member of the generation needs to be checked out. In other words, they were saying, normally, if the Nasi is holding the proper place, is the right level that a Nasi should be on, so then the Nasi goes as mispalel, and it starts to rain. Why? Because the Nasi passes the eye test. But when the Nasi does not pass the eye test, then everyone else needs to start being checked out, and we're not going to make the cuts. In other words, he was basically throwing a line at them to say that the Nasi was not an appropriate place. And what happened? Asu Avde, the Nasi heard about this, and his servants came. They put a handkerchief around his neck. They were bothering him. They were causing him a lot of pain. Amrle Beni Maase and Shavke the Hanami Mitzarla. In other words, the people said, B'nei Masi, he is a member of our city. We know this guy. And Shafki, leave him alone. Tanami mitzar lon, he also bothers us. In other words, chill out. This is the way this guy behaves. And we used to be very upset that he used to bother us all the time. But kiva de chazin and kalmila l'shum shemaya lo amri midi v'shakin le. In other words, they recognize that this person, he did sometimes get under people's skin a little bit, but when they started to examine his actions a little bit more, they realized he's really a sincere person. And when he gives musar, and when he gets under people's skin, it's not just because he wants to bother them, but because he actually has something to teach them. We got to get moving over here. Aton nami shavkuhu, you should also leave him alone. Rabbi Gozar Taanis of Lasmit. Rabbi was Gozar Taanis, and it did not rain. Nochs kamei Ilfa came before them. But Amrila Rabbi Ilfi. Some say that his name was Rabbi Ilfi. I think it's a machlokes if it's the same Ilfa we had a couple of blocks before, who was out with Rabbi Yochanan when they were deciding should they go to work or should they stay in yeshiva. What happened was Amar Mashiv Haruach. He said Mashiv Haruach, and all of a sudden V'nasha Zika. It started to get windy. Mora Geshem, he said the words Mora Geshem, Basa Mitra started to rain. Amarle, my Uftach, they recognize the person says Mashav Baruch Mora Geshem, and immediately it starts raining. What's your story? Amarle, the Yarna Bekusta Dechika. I live in a very poor place. The less Bechamra, the Kiddush of Avdalta. They don't have any wine for Kiddush and Avdallah. Tarachna, I work hard. Vasina Chamra, the Kiddush of Avdalta. I'm always the one who brings wine for Kiddush and Avdallah. Because of me, they're able to be used to the midst of Kiddush and Avdallah. So, again, we see the importance of sponsoring wine for Kiddush and Avdallah. And perhaps we could just say, if it's the same Ilfa, he went to work. But he obviously wasn't making lots of money. But what did he do when he went to work? He used his money to be able to support the Kehillah. They can make Kiddush and Avdallah. Rav, Ikla Lahu Asra, he came to this land, and Gozar Taanis of Lo Asimitri. He was Gozar Taanis, but still it didn't rain. Nachas Kamei Shlicha de Tzibura. Chazan went up. Amar Mashav Ruach Mashav Zika. He said Mashav Ruach, it got windy. Amar Mordei Geshem V'Asimitri. He said Mordei Geshem, and it started to rain. Amarle Mai Ovdach. What's your story? Amarle Mikri Dar de Kiana. You know what I am? I'm a cheder Rebbe. I teach small children. Mikraina Livnei Aniye Kivnei Asire. I don't give preferential treatment to the wealthy people. I treat the children of the poor people exactly the same way as I treat the children of the wealthy people. If someone can't afford the tuition, I don't charge them anything. I have this little bowl of fish. The cholman, the pasha, any child who does not want to learn, what did I do? I bribe the child, binayu, and I give them a little fish. A very important chinuch lesson over here. First of all, no preferential treatment to people who have more money. Second of all, motivate a child to learn. Don't force the child to learn, but motivate the child to learn with things that are exciting to the child, and ultimately the child will enjoy it. Ad Asi, Vikari until he comes and he learns. Rav Nachman Gozar Tanisa, Mitra. He was Gozar Taanis, and it was Mispalal, he davened, Mitra, it did not rain. Amar Shaklul Nachman Chibuta min Guta Da'ara. He helped me, said, listen, if I can't do my job appropriately, I should lose my position. Chalash Daite, he got very depressed about this, and when he went down a little bit, he got a little bit depressed. So then Vasti Mitra, in other words, humility helped that the tefillah was niskava. Rabba Gozar Tanisa. Rabba was Gozar Taanis. By Rachmi V'Lasa Mitra. Again, the same story. He was mispal, did not rain. Amrulei. Rav Yehuda ki have Gozar Tanisa Asamitra. They went to the Rav and said, "Listen, what kind of Rav are you?" Rav Yehuda, when he was Gozar Taanis, started to rain. Amrulhu Mayavid. What should I do? Imishum Tenuye Anana Difaminayo. What are you trying to say? That Yehuda is better than us? If you're telling me that they learned better than us in terms of learning, not true. We're better than them. Why did Bishnei Yehuda call Tenuye? Turning the page now, Naftali on base. V'Nizikin Ave. They learned Nizikin. They learned Bava Kama, Bava Basra, all the Masechtas in Nizikin. V'Anan us Kamasninan B'Shita Sidrim. We learned all 6 different Sidarim of Shas. Yehuda got to Uktzin. and they would learn. Ha'isha shekaveshes yerek b'kedera, v'amrila zeisim shekavshan b'trofeim tehorim. They learned that it was tahar, and Amar habi derav Shmuel kachazina hacha. And there was the Amar havayat derav Shmuel kachazina hacha. They were pointing out that this is a very difficult sugyas. In other words, what they were talking about there was, in Uktzin it talks about Tumah and Tyra, they were talking about the halachas of yados, which means that sometimes you have something which is part of the peri, it protects it, and yados are they serve it like the stem. So they're talking about if you're going to soak them, if you're going to pickle them, and the stem disintegrates, it's not makabel tumah. And they were learning that, they pointed out how difficult it was. However, ba'anan, kamasnin and buktzin klesim mesifta, we have 13 different yeshivas that I learned the halachas of Uktzin. So we're definitely better than them. Bilu of Yehuda, Vishalav Chad Masana, Asimitra. Yehuda, when he would take off one shoe, Asimitra, it would start to rain. V'anan katzavkina kul yom v'lekad ashkachbahan. He was lamenting the fact that we are much better in learning. We have a much higher level of learning. We know Tumah and Tara in 13 different yeshivas, and Rabbi Yehuda takes off one shoe, starts to rain. We daven all day and nothing happens. Imishu of dust. Now he said maybe it's not because of learning, maybe it's because of our behavior. He said, "Iika techazi midi." If there's anybody here who sees something inappropriate that's happening, lema, tell us. Avamayasu gedoli adar she'ein doran doma. Must be that there's something wrong with the generation. It's not us. Of Yehuda, Schaza Hanu Beitrei Davikab Karti Berifta. Yehuda saw that there were two people who were wasting bread. They were playing around with bread. They're throwing it around. Amar Shmamina Ika Sava Ba'alma. There must be that there's tremendous amount of affluence. There's plenty of food here. Yov Eini. He looked at them. Havikaf. There was a famine. There was no more food. So now this is the story with the Yehuda when he took a shua. Amru Lei, Rabban of Kahana Breder Nechunya. Rabbanan said to Kahana, the son of Nechunya, Shami Mar, the Shkiach Kamei, and Nase, the Lepik Bepescha, the Samach Lashuka. Make him go out. In other words, make him go out. Make Yehuda see what's going on here and see about what it looks like when there's food shortages. Asya Benafik Lashuka, they made him go out. Benafik Lashuka, he went out to the market. Kaza Knufya, he saw a group of people. Amr Lahu, he said to them, why is everyone gathering over here? Amru Lei, they said to him, Akuspa de Tamri Kaimi becomes Mizdavid. Someone brought a box of dates over here, and everyone's gathering together to buy it because there's such a big shortage. Amar Shmamina Kafna Ba'alma. There's a famine in the world, and Amar Le L'Shamei, he said to one of his attendants over there, Shlof Li Masani, take off my shoe. Shalaf Le, Shalaf Le Chad Masani took off one of his shoe. Why? Because when people are Bitsar, everyone has to join Bitzar. Even the leaders who are not necessarily in pain have to join Bitzar. If you had in this past week's parsha, Rashi tells us that there was a famine, and therefore Yosef did not engage in Tashmish Hamita all that period of time. That's the right that it's Aser. And the Asa Mitra, and immediately as he took his shoe off, it started to rain. Kimata l'mishla fachrina. They came to take off the second shoe. Asa Eliyahu v'Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu. If you can take off the other shoe, it's going to rain so hard, the whole world's going to be destroyed. Amar of Mari Braid Vashmuel. Anna having Imna Aguda Denara. I was standing at the Aguda Denara at the side of the water. Dinahar Papa at the river of Papa. Chazdoy Malachi to Idmu Malachi. I saw Malachim who were disguised as sailors. The Kamaitzi Chala, they're bringing sand to Melunuha ala Arvi, and they were filling up their boats. The heavy Kimcha Desmide, the sand turned into Kamachat to flour. Also, Kuli Alma Lemizban, everyone came to buy from it, and Amar Lahu, but he said to these people, Mehalatism, don't buy it. Why? The Maisanisim who, this is not natural. We don't want to sustain ourselves off of food which is not natural. It's Maisanisim, this is miraculous, and therefore, don't buy that. Lamachar, the next day, Asyan, Arvi, the Parzina, another boat came with legitimate chitin. I know we're drop over time, but we have to just go a little further. We'll go a little further, and maybe I'll record the last part of the daf, like this you won't fall behind for tomorrow. Rabba Ikla lahagrunya. He came to the town of Hagrunya, and Gazar Taanisa, he instituted a fast day of Leras Mitzvah. It didn't rain. Amar lahu, Bisu, go to sleep. Bisu kuliyama betanasach. Everyone should go to sleep while they're still fasting. In other words, fast and don't break your fast before you go to sleep. Lemachar, the next morning, Amar lahu, mi ika dechaz lechelma. Last night you all went to sleep fasting. Did anybody have a dream? Lema, tell us what it was. Amar lahu Rabbi Elazar me'agrunya l'didi ikaryun b'chalma. I had a dream, and what did it say? Salam tav. In other words, he greeted a good person. L'rav tav, to a good rav. Merivun tav, d'mituvya me'teveleh. In other words, he said, he gave a long, very extensive welcome to a good person from a good place. Amar Shema Mina, Yisratzin, he must be right now. It's a good time to daven. Mi Bayrachmi. We should all be Mispal, Bayrachmi, they were Mispal of Asi Mitra, and started to rain. Who Gavrat the Chayev, Nagda Beidina, there's a person who's Mechayev, who was Chayev Malkus in Bezdin. Beidina de Rava. He was Chayev Malkus in the Bezdin of Rava. Why Mishum de Baal Kusis? He had a relation with a Kusis, with a Kusis. Whether they're Jewish or not is a discussion, but ultimately we're going to assume here that they're not considered Jewish over here. And Nagdi Rava, he got Malchus Umis. Unfortunately, the guy died. Ishtama Milsa Beish Shvar Malka. The Shvar Malka heard the story. The Shvar Malka is the secular leader of the country. Bar Tzuli Rava, they came to be Mitzar Rava, to give him pain, to punish him for killing this guy. Amra Lay Ifra Hormuz. Ifra Hormuz, who was Ema the Shvar Malka, said to her daughter, in other words, the mother of the Shvar Malka said to her daughter, Livra, Lo lahavi lacha asik dvar b'hadi yudai. Don't get involved in the Yidden. It's not good for you. Why? The command marayu yoglu. Whatever they ask for, they get. And Amar Allah, Mahi, what is this? And she said, Bayin rachami vasi mitra. They are mispal for achmanas and it rains. Amar Allah hu mishum dizim de mitrahu. That's because it was the winter. It was going to rain anyway. Ella libo rachmi ha'idna. It's kufas Tammuz. Let's test it. Let's tell them to ask for rain in the summer in Tammuz. V'leisi mitra. We'll see if it rains. Shalach leila rabba kiven daitach u'bay rachmi deleisi mitra. He asked to do mispal in the summer that it should rain. Bay rachmi. He indeed was mispal v'lo mitra. It did not rain. Amar lefan Rebbeinu Shalom. He said, Hashem elikim ba'azdenu shamanu avosenu sapru lanu paral pu'ulas b'yimeim mekenim v'anu b'ina v'lei re'inu. In other words, he quoted a pasuk that HaKadosh Baruch Hu listens to them. He says, we're being mispal and we're not seeing this. Off the mitra, it starts to rain. Ad shvoch marzbit detziplu diglas. Everything, all the pipes were filling up with water all the way down the tzipari of diglas. Also, Avua, his father came to his chazli v'cham, came in a dream, and he said, Amarle, mi'ikat the mitra kam shmai kulihai. Are you bothering the shmaim so much? Amarle, shnei duchtecha, shani duchtecha, and shani duchtecha l'macha ashkech the mirsham harai b'sakini. He told him, shani duchtecha, switch your bed, sleep someplace else. Don't sleep in the same bed. Indeed, shani duchtecha, he switched his place. Lamachar, the next day, ashkech the mirsham harai b'sakini. They found that his bed was filled up with knives from shadim. And ultimately, we see that if a person forces the Rebbeinu Shalom, so to speak, you can't force the Rebbeinu Shalom, but you put a tremendous amount of pressure. Tzaddikim don't. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want to turn them down. So if they put a tremendous amount of pressure on HaKadosh Baruch Hu to perform an ace, then ultimately bad things could happen. He was given advice not to sleep in his bed because had he slept in his bed, he would have died. We'll continue tomorrow. Ritz Hashem from Rav Papa. Have a wonderful day. I'm sorry that I'm over time. We tried. These amudim are very, very large. Have a wonderful day. And a Chanukah.